One, two, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Hello and welcome to Pop Screen, part of the Geek Show Podcast Network. We are that corner of the Geek Show that likes to look at the good, the bad, and the perplexing of movies, either starring, about, or by pop stars. No, the podcast covers a broad range of musical and cinematic genres, from country and western to hip-hop, from documentaries to science fiction. I'm your host, Graham Williamson. I'm a writer for the Geek Show and Byline Times, as well as a short filmmaker and video artist. And I've been joined this week by...
And Aidan, hello there. Hello.
Hello. Where can people find you?
No, you can find me on Letterboxd under the username Aidan F. I'm also on Twitter at Doco and Drummer. And of course, you've brought me on because I am, of course, the most northern of Rastafarians.
Yeah, that's it. Yes, yeah. We are. I think we've both got good hair, but we are bald head, spiritually speaking. So, yes.
Yes. Because of course, this week's episode of Pop Screen is brought to you by reggae.
It is. It's the second in our Jamaican theme month, and we couldn't really have a film based on pop music movies from Jamaica without covering Perry Henzell's 1972 classic, "The Harder They Come." Which I think wins the title for the film wins the trophy for the film we've covered on Pop Screen, where it is the most impossible to say the title without getting the theme song stuck in your head.
I know, because I've seen this film more than once, by the way, and even from the first viewing, as soon as you hear "the harder they come, the harder they fall," one and all, it's such an earworm that honestly it'd be played till the day I die, more than likely.
Yes. But yeah, I hadn't seen this before, and I found it brushed interestingly against my expectations for what it was. Obviously, I knew the soundtrack. Everyone knows the soundtrack.
Yeah.
But in terms of the film itself, I was thinking, well, I knew it was a crime film. I knew it starred Jimmy Cliff. I knew, in fact, it had an all-black cast and it was made in the early 70s. And so you just unconsciously slip into thinking, right, it's like a blaxploitation film, but it's set in Jamaica and presumably has a reggae soundtrack in place of a funk soundtrack. But it's not that, but I think it's interestingly different. When you first meet Ivanhoe Martin, the character that Jimmy Cliff's playing, he's not your super slick blaxploitation movie lead, not at all.
No, totally agree. Because like I said, was this his debut performance, Jimmy Cliff?
I think so. Let me just check.
Because you don't. Well, let's put it this way: he's not like Isaac Hayes, say in like say Truck Turner or something like that, where he's like this complete unwieldy character, which is just completely badass in a way. In this way, you just see him in a lot of ways. I've seen a lot of comparisons online comparing like The Harder They Come as like a Jamaican Scarface, which I could kind of get. Which which is like a rise and fall like structure, but at the same time, it takes its own identity, I think.
Well, at the start of it, it's like it's quite a sort of. If you watch that first sort of 10 minutes or so without any knowledge of what the film actually is, you would assume that this was quite a warm character drama about a country boy losing his way in the big city, because that's what it feels like initially.
Yeah, especially with the open shots of, I believe it's like of Jamaica, and then you just see that rickety bus going along those dirt gravel paths.
Yeah.
The suspension on that thing must be a nightmare. I mean, to control.
I guess, but when I say it's not like a crime movie from the start, it is a suspense movie from the start, and the suspense is mostly that thing's going to fall to bits at any minute.
Yes, it just makes me remind me never take any public transport in that country ever.
Or in this country, the way things are going.
True, that's very true.
But yeah, he gets into the big city on this bus that I assume just falls apart like a clown car 3 seconds after it finishes appearing on screen. And he moves back in with his mum in exactly the way that Foxy Brown doesn't.
Yeah, or imagine a version of Scarface where Tony Montana moves in with his mum and tells him to
watch that. Actually, that would be good.
Tells him to kick that cocaine habit he has and stops chainsawing people. You can't imagine that happening in Scarface, can you?
Not really. No, it's not very. I suppose it is a bit Brian De Palma, but maybe something from his horror films rather than his crime films. Yeah,
that's true. Yeah.
But yeah, the key line in the opening section is when he's at the domino game and someone says to him, "What do you know about reality? You just come from the country." And I guess the rest of the film spends its time answering that because he becomes a guy who almost creates reality after that. He becomes a folk hero.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't put that in my notes actually because it's like, you witness like this rise and fall structure of obviously this wannabe superstar who wants to be like a serious musician of the Jamaican music scene, but it slowly inverts itself in its own weird way, don't you think? And I think at the end of it, you get, I think, a really fun film, to be honest with you, because I really enjoyed it rewatching it the second time around.
I was hugely impressed by it. I think I was primed to enjoy it because I love Jimmy Cliff, and I've spent the last sort of few years, I mentioned on the last podcast, really since Small Axe, I've spent the last sort of 4 years or so just falling in love with reggae and that generation of reggae artists in particular. But I was impressed that it has a lot of other stuff that I really enjoy. That whole, the sociological term is social bandit. Those people like Robin Hood or Bonnie and Clyde who were celebrated for being criminals because they are thought to uphold the values of their society in a way that the lawmen pursuing them don't. I think that's always a really interesting theme for me, and it's really, really strong in this.
Yeah, no. And like I say, it ties in neatly quite nicely with the last podcast we did together when we covered Nev Kelly, because they're just two, like, canonical crime movies. Obviously, one is like a complete disaster, whereas this gets along quite nicely,
Yeah. No, I agree. And it's actually based on, very loosely, it must be said, based on real life Jamaican criminal who did have that sort of outsider folk hero status. He was called Ivanhoe Martin, which I guess is not the name that you would give your lead character. Otherwise, it is fairly odd, but it's got some of the beats of his life. It's got, him taunting the police. It's got the sort of every one of these movies kind of has a version of that kind of primal scene, don't they? Where you see him being mistreated so badly that you think, "Oh right, yeah, that's why this is all justified." And in both the fictional Ivanhoe Martin that Jimmy Cliff plays and in the real life Ivanhoe Martin, it was being caned over a barrel, like being
which in this it's portrayed like kind of like a penetration all of a sudden.
Yes.
Where you just see the scenes of flashing of Jimmy Cliff like he's leaning over, and all of a sudden the police just tear his clothes off and he just gets whipped on the backside. No, it's very well effective, I think, for something that's from the 1972 standards.
No, I definitely agree. I did wonder before I did my research whether, like, Ivanhoe Martin was sexually assaulted, and that was just a way of depicting it while not depicting it, if you get what I mean. Was that a way of
Yeah.
allegorizing it? But no, apparently that was it, caning. And yeah, you're right, it's a very sort of strong and graphic scene that's very suggestive of sexual violence as well.
Yeah. Because going back to the point on obviously being portraying it as like this Robin Hood kind of archetype,
Mm,
because there are several suggestions littered throughout the film that suggest that. I mean, the one specific one I kept coming to mind is obviously when they put on Django in the cinema,
yeah,
and you get to see clips of Django playing in the mines, and I didn't even clock it that was what they were watching the first time around, because you just immediately think, "Holy shit, is that Franco Nero?" Just like shooting at obviously it's the famous scene with Franco Nero with the is it like
the red
the
clad
the
kind
red
of
clat? Yeah,
bands. Yeah.
yeah. So there's a lot of signals littered throughout, and you can kind of tell that Henzell like knows his shit really of what he's
Yeah,
trying to do here.
definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's like in that sort of 60s and 70s era of reggae, there were quite a lot of references to pop culture heroes. You know, the
Mm.
Upsetters had an album called Return of Django, so that obviously links in. There's a song on the soundtrack here called 007. I was also
Yes.
listening. I
Yeah.
was listening to a Derek Harriott album
Uh-huh.
recently, and one of them begins with a toast about Doctor Who.
That's not what I was expecting.
Nope. I was
Weird.
I was hoping that it was then going to turn into a reggae version of the Doctor Who theme, but alas, no. But it's still pretty incredible, I think.
Damn it. Right. Okay. The one thing Island Records forgot to put in that Exodus by Bob Marley and the Wailers.
Yes.
Um,
Well, we should talk about Ireland a bit, really, because both of the films that we've done, and I
hmm,
suppose this shouldn't be surprising because no one else is better positioned to like crossover between movies and music and Jamaican culture. Um, but both of these films that we've done for Pop
hmm,
Screen's Jamaican Month are products of Island Records' film division.
hmm, yes.
And this was the first thing they did. They'd been trying very hard to break Jimmy Cliff in the like global market. And I think this was put in production just as they finally managed to do it. It's quite funny looking at the sort of the Jimmy Cliff single releases in the UK on Ireland, because like
Hmm,
Vietnam, that song was not a big hit. Wonderful World, Beautiful People,
hmm.
yes, fine. And it's like, yeah, okay, I can kind of see why people went for that a bit more than Vietnam.
Yeah.
But yeah, this was like Chris Blackwell's lap of honor, I guess. He'd finally made Jimmy Cliff a star, and
Yes.
he decided to put him in a film. At which point, Jimmy Cliff left the label.
Oh, that's an ultimate FU moment, isn't it?
It really is. Yeah, yeah.
But it reminds me like Chris Blackwell like tried to like popularize reggae even before then, because I remember,
Mm,
uh, and this is like going through my infinite Bob Marley knowledge, because he was like one of the first musical artists that I ever properly got into as a teenager.
okay.
I believe it was the one with Concrete Jungle on it. Let me just quickly double check the album title. I think it was actually called Concrete Jungle, the record. Hold on, let me just quickly double check. Catch a Fire, that was it.
Catch a Fire,
Yeah.
yes. Yeah.
Where initially, because there was two versions of that album produced simultaneously. There was the original, obviously, reggae dub, but there was also a version where Blackwell like positioned it with like overdubbed it with like extra wailing guitars and drums
Right.
to more present it more like a conventional, well, not necessarily a rock album, not in the same way like a heavy metal record, but try
But
to
it's got a
commercial.
bit of sweetener on it for Western ears, right?
Yeah, yes,
Yeah.
yeah, no, exactly. So this isn't unheard of with obviously with reggae music at the time,
Mm.
essentially.
Not all, and it's interesting that Cliff's split with Blackwell was because he thought Blackwell was putting more effort into trying to promote rock artists rather than reggae artists, which
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, maybe it's true. All I can think of looking back at like the early 70s Island Records roster with 21st century eyes is how much effort Blackwell was putting in trying to make everyone a success compared with the bare minimum that record labels do now. It's like there's no way that anyone would have stuck with Jimmy Cliff or Nick Drake through like their early unsuccessful albums, but back then, yeah, I guess it's a record label. We put out records.
It's a very much like nowadays. It's like a very much like scissors and glue approach, where they're just like, oh yeah, let's just slap a band-aid if there's anything that's gone wrong in the mixing, isn't it? Yeah,
Totally, yeah. It's just a lost world. And similarly, I don't know whether, like, I'm sure Blackwell wasn't like up to modern standards of respecting his artists' rights, where nowadays there's an expectation that you should give the artists the option to own their masters, you should give them a bigger share of the profits, all of this stuff. But that didn't happen, sadly, back in the 60s and 70s. But I don't know whether Cliff's criticism is fair or whether it is just the case that there is a limit to how much you can promote reggae music in like the West in the early 70s. Certainly before, I'm talking before Marley really hits it big. At a time when reggae is still pretty much looked on as novelty music at this point in Britain and America.
Yeah, and it's a sad thing about reggae music as well, because it's really not like that at all when you think of it as novelty music. There's some, like I say, like obviously you were comparing it to funk earlier. In a very much way, it's like a very soulful, just incredibly diverse like rhythm of music. In a lot of ways, when you're talking about like I say, reggae, funk, even Afrobeat, they are just like completely honed in on their genres and know their instrumentations well. Yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah, and when you look at the reggae songs that were successful in like the 60s, you've got Max Romeo, who did one of the greatest political reggae albums of all time in the form of War in a Babylon, but that wasn't the one that broke through in the UK. In the UK, we liked his song Wet Dream because it was rude, weren't it?
Yeah.
So it's like, is this all Blackwell's fault, or is it slightly the problem that the British public were pretty thick?
It's very true. I mean, let's be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, back onto the harder they come.
Back onto the harder they come. Yeah. So you've got this quite long build-up where he's going around people's gardens looking for work as a gardener, like a sort of Jamaican version of Boys from the Black Stuff.
It's very true, because Jimmy Cliff just wanders into this lady's back garden. It just asks for, "Can I wash your car, please, ma'am?" And it's just like that's like someone in Britain like wandering up to like a landlord's house saying, "Excuse me, can I fix your boiler?" or something like that. It's just really strange. I mean, who left the gate open for one's sake?
I mean, she's not that happy about it, but she seems more chill than I think people nowadays would be. But of course, it's not all an idyll. You've got crime bubbling away in the background. You've also got this dystopian vision of Jamaica as a country where a record executive can't go out for a drive without having a barbershop quartet sing at him.
Yeah, and it's just
Chilling.
and then immediately you just think, okay, what's your opinion on the song then, Jerry? And he just goes, I'll see you next Tuesday, and they never see that guy ever again. A contract.
But that's the parallel story, isn't it? There's a lot in here that's derived from the real life Ivanhoe Martin story, but there's one big bit that isn't, which is that quite wisely, when he was on the run, Ivanhoe Martin did not stop to record several absolutely solid gold reggae hits.
Yeah, that's a particularly missing part of the story. Because, like I said, there's no "The Harder They Come." There is no. What was the other songs called again? "You Can Get It If You Really Want." Nothing
Yeah.
like that, or many rivers to cross to record. Nope, nothing like that. It's severely lacking. So I call out Perry Henzell for dramatically overstating his powers here.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think that if the real life Ivanhoe Martin had a record contract, he might be slightly easier to track down.
Yeah. But like I say, those recording sequences, honestly, like I say, like any other like form of reggae music, because like I say, like Graham, whenever I get the chance to listen to reggae, I will ultimately do that. But those sequences where he is recording those hit songs, there's some great involves some great like demo recordings, I want to say, because
Yeah,
they're not
yeah.
the official recordings that are used on this soundtrack. In fact, I think Henzell does play it at the official one, like right as the end credits roll. But these are like recorded as if they're live, basically, and it
Yes.
gives like this very homely, very intimate atmosphere that I really do appreciate and really do like.
Yeah, that was one of the other big surprises of the movie for me, in that it is actually better at depicting that process of writing and recording songs than several actual musical biopics.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, it's got a bit where they're trying to write The Harder They Come and they don't have a couple of lines in, so they just go for a bit just to fill in, and it's like that never happens in a musical biopic. If you're watching, if they made a big budget Hollywood biopic of Jimmy Cliff, he would have all of the lyrics to The Harder They Come just there.
Yeah, just there. Yeah,
That's
yeah,
how it
exactly.
happens in biopics.
Like I say, it's that classic Bohemian Rhapsody moment, and I hope you do get to talk about Bohemian Rhapsody on the biopic, on the podcast. Even sorry, I don't know what I'm saying there. Where it's like they come up with the idea of "We Will Rock You," and then
Yes.
is it Roger Taylor or something just comes up with a drum beat saying this song, right, guys, this song will absolutely rock the audience. And it's just that terribly cheesy way, and you just think, it could be a bit subtler, guys.
But even in like, I don't know if you've been to see Bob Marley One Love.
I haven't yet.
The
No, not
right,
yet.
yeah, yeah. It bugs me because I know there's a more interesting story in there that most musical biopics have. It's not just, oh, he started recording some albums and then he took too many drugs and then he cleaned up and come back, which is what 90% of musical biopics tend to be.
And then also in the case of Bob Marley, there was a lot of infidelity there as well. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
the good luck trying to
that
pop
too.
that in the film.
Yeah.
Yeah, but no, there's obviously a lot more in his story to tell, and I don't think it tells it very well. But there's a studio scene where they're like playing, and Bob just complains that it's too up tempo and he needs to
Right.
slow down,
Mhm.
and you sort of think, yeah, that's a pretty easy fix, isn't it? But it's presented as this big sort of crisis moment. They don't have the direction for the album, and you're thinking, just 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 slow down, just play it slower. You can tell that it's made by someone who has not got any songwriting experience. They don't have anything realistic to put, even on the level of just having someone hum through a couple of lines where they don't have the lyrics yet, which isn't rocket science. It's not a really difficult thing to put in, but I appreciated it being there because a lot of biopics don't even bother with that.
Yeah, no, that is true. Like I say, it's and this is why I'm kind of, whenever we do a pop screen recording together, I try to avoid like the biopics, because once you do get into the biopics, you just end up talking. Yeah, there's that scene that's typical of a music biopic. Anything else? Yep, no. There's the live recording. That's a triumph for the artist. Yep, okay,
Yeah.
yep. And it's just ends up becoming a ticky box thing. So it's, like I say, it's much more appreciative when obviously and much more interesting, I think, when they take elements of the music biopic but implement them into a completely different genre, and we rework it around that, which I think, The Harder They Come does much better.
Yeah, definitely. I think it helps that for all Jimmy Cliff became a legend at this point, no one was in the market for a Jimmy Cliff biopic, so they took him and like pitched something much more interesting to him as well. But it's got a lovely cameo in it as well. That when the first acetate of the Harder They Come, of the title track, gets played at a disco. The DJ playing it is Prince Buster.
Oh, just for listeners who don't know, who is Prince Buster?
Well,
Graham.
Prince Buster was one of the key figures in the 60s Jamaican ska wave that preceded reggae. Ska's it was quite shocking to me as a British person to find out that ska predated reggae, because of course in British terms we experienced that the other way around. Bob Marley became a star here, and then you had that great sort of Anglo-Jamaican ska wave in the late 70s, early 80s. But that's kind of tied in, because Madness's first single, The Prince, was named after Prince Buster. If you were into ska at that point, he was it. He was massive.
And in terms of the British culture as well, they're also influenced like a lot of punk as well. Because I have heard, because I still haven't seen Bob Marley biopic, but where they invade a concert by The Clash.
They do, yes.
Which,
I
mean, it's not unheard of, because I know Joe Strummer did eventually, because they do correlate when history does repeat itself, because I know Joe Strummer did do a version of Redemption Song, and even though that's technically not reggae, that's more closer to folk music, that song. Or Jamaican folk.
But there's loads of Clash reggae links, famously their version of Junior Mervin's Police and Thieves. You know, they were really leading that kind of integration between punk and reggae in late 70s Britain.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's nice that it is a bit corny, but I will give them credit. Given that this is the scene where Bob Marley has just arrived in Britain for the first time, I will give them credit for not having the Clash play London Calling. At least it avoids that cliche.
Yeah, that's very true. I will give him that.
Yeah, but it turns into this sort of combined musical biopic and chase thriller, which in genre mixing terms makes even Rocket Man look a bit unambitious.
Yeah, because I mean, like I say, like midway through the film, I believe it's was there something about getting his bicycle back, or Ivanhoe's bicycle? He goes to find the guy who gets his bicycle back, and obviously he's sold it on, so he can't help anything. And they get involved with a broken bottle and knife fight.
Yes,
and the knife fight in this it's actually pretty. For like I say, it is pretty bloody. Yeah, I don't want to say. Like I say, it is quite violent and quite shocking, but it is, like I say, it comes in just the right moment when things like teeter out of control for Ivan, where obviously his dreams and hopes ultimately get jaded a little bit, and then it just kind of teeters into the downhill aspect, where all that starts to come downhill, really.
I mean, the violence in it is, you can see that it's low budget. It was very low budget, and it was made like piecemeal over about 2 years, which is why, despite being released in 72, there's like one point where someone has a very big, very prominent tax disc on their car saying December 1970. But I think it's low budget violence that's effective. You know, I think about that, the knife fight, as you said. I think about the motorcycle crash, which is all shot point of view.
Which I think like a great piece of creativity there, because you just see, like, obviously Ivanhoe shoots someone, and then you just slowly see the camera just spiral out of control. Yeah, I think it's very well handled. Yeah.
I mean, it's clearly been done because they don't have the budget to crash a motorcycle, but it really works.
Yeah, exactly. It captures that illusion, very well.
Yeah. It's also, it's one of those films that I think is lovingly outsider-ish. It's like you see this in a lot of 70s low budget films. I don't know, maybe after this people became too slick. Maybe everyone started buying like paperback books on how to direct a film and how to write a screenplay. But in the 70s ones, there were some real eccentricities. Like there are 2 close-ups in this that I do not think would be considered by anyone else. But the first one is when Ivanhoe's being whipped by the police, and
which we mentioned before.
But there is quite a sort of determined close-up on his piss splashing on the floor.
Oh yes, I forgot about that. Oh yeah, which you could think of it as like incongruous, but at the
Mm.
same time, it's very it's. I don't want to. I want to say interesting, but even then, it just makes me sound
It's
like a bit of a
memorable, right?
yeah, memorable. Yeah,
Yeah.
if I say interesting, it makes me sound like a bit of a pervert, really. But, but
It does. It makes the scene stick in your head by being such a wayward decision. And the other one is, I guess, maybe a more characteristically Jamaican moment,
Hmm.
which is the motorcycle scene, which is excerpted on most posters and banner images on streaming sites or anywhere else that you might
Hmm.
watch this movie. That scene begins with a pan up a marijuana plant, which is fetishistic, is all I can say. You know, there are camera operators who have passed up their camera up Marilyn Monroe's legs with less lust in their hearts than that.
Ah. Making what's the name of that drug scare film from the 1930s again?
Oh, Reefer Madness.
Lusting Up Reefer Madness. That was the one.
Yes.
Which is not a tasteless thing, I'm gonna say.
Yeah. But it's those sort of, again, you said homemade, it's those little homemade quirks in it. When you look at the opening credits, if you can tear your eye off that terrifying fucking bus ride,
Yeah.
you'll find like art director Sally Henzell and quite a lot of other family members, other jobs being covered by the same people. And it's like, it does help the film feel authentically of its time and place. You can tell that it's not the work of like American directors thinking, all right, Jamaican music's hot, let's go over there and make a cheap
Yeah.
exploitation film. It's not that.
It's from people who are from the island itself and they
Yeah.
know what to do, even when they, like I said, they don't have the budget because, like I say, obviously the poverty conditions over in Jamaica. I mean, does it take 2 cents, obviously, to think that way? But like I said, they just run with it, and they do it, like I say, incredibly well for obviously for a background that came off this well, you know.
Yeah.
But like I say, I mean, there's plenty of other moments too that I just when I immediately think back on and reflect on, it's just really memorable. Like I say, one of the characters Ivanhoe meets early on is the character of Preacher,
Yeah.
who I've always looking back on it, he stuck out to me on my first watch because he was my favorite character, largely because of how fucking terrifying he is.
Yes.
Because he could be a really, like I said, he could be like a really nasty piece of work, but at the same time, it's not a nastiness that feels unearned, if you get what I mean. He's there and he serves a purpose for the story, like I say, and for obviously his inevitable downfall, I think.
I think like Longer, the boss who he ends up slashing because he steals his bicycle, which I wonder if that's a deliberate nod to bicycle thieves, by the way.
Yeah. You do think that, don't you?
Yeah. There are a lot of kind of neo-realist and kitchen sink films that do seem to center around bicycles, and maybe it's part of the lineage, but yeah, Preacher and Longer are just two of those people who just make Ivanhoe's early stay in the city feel so much more oppressive. And I think the fact that it takes quite a long time to get to the stage where he's a criminal on the run, I think that time is well used. I think it really knows how to set up its characters. Yeah.
Because like I say, my favorite scene involving Preacher is obviously when he confronts him in the bicycle shed, like late at night, because obviously he's just trying to fix his bicycle. He's not doing anything, like doing a drug deal or anything like that. He's just trying to fix his bicycle. So Preacher just immediately confronts him and it's just like, what are you doing at this time of the night? Oh yeah, I'm just fixing my bicycle. Fixing your bicycle? You should be reading your Bible. Reading your Bible. You hear what I tell you, boy? It's just like, so Jesus Christ.
Yes. Yeah, that's great. So in the sort of later parts of it, that's when it really gets into the kind of social banditry elements of the story. You've got that great scene where they're just driving through Jamaica and everywhere has graffiti on it saying, I was here, I am everywhere.
Yeah. There's also that scene where the DJ plays The Harder They Fall obviously in the mixing desk, and he just admits saying like, look, we know the reggae star of this song who sang this song has been a bit of a wrong un lately, so but by request we're going to play this in, like, I don't want to say tribute, but as a as a commemoration for obviously the talent that would have been, basically. And that's kind of the signal that I like to think that the record has brought Ivan frame, but not in the way expected, really.
Yeah, that's very true. I suppose that for all we've sort of laughed at the idea of a criminal on the run stopping to make reggae records, the film actually does surprisingly well by it, doesn't it? It's like it does feel like what would happen if this strange thing happened in real life.
Yeah, it definitely feels like a continuation. It doesn't like it's not like the reggae subplot is like or the Heart of the Fall, the creation of Heart of the Fall subplot is like dropped into thin air and never to be seen again, just to focus on the criminal spree or the shootouts. It's like it's a nice like curve continuation between the two, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously there for commercial reasons, and I'm sure if they hadn't cast one of the all-time great reggae singers in this role, then this subplot wouldn't have been there. But they do actually manage to find a way to knit it back in to that whole strand about the idea of Ivanhoe as like a folk hero, as someone people consider to be. I'm going to slip into Baz Luhrmann here, but Ivanhoe's kind of like the rock star of his era, isn't he?
That's the second podcast I've been on where we've referenced Baz Luhrmann in that way.
It's just it's his own line. I'm feeling gentle towards Baz Luhrmann now because I really enjoyed Elvis, but it is very funny to me that every time he makes a film on anyone, if Baz Luhrmann had made Oppenheimer, he'd be going on about how Oppenheimer was the rock star of his time. You can't stop him.
The rock star of the atomic bomb. Oh dear.
Yeah, and it becomes self-reflexive. It becomes a film about sort of reggae's status as music of the people, expressed by a narrative in which it is literally outlaw music. And I love the fact that I'd seen the posters of this, which usually have this image of Jimmy Cliff standing in this weird kind of pigeon-toed stance with his elbows bent and a gun in each hand, where it's like, even I can tell, mate, the recoil's going to kill you with that. But I was delighted to find out that these images, which, like I say, I'd seen all over the marketing, are actually propaganda images within the film. They are images that Ivanhoe takes of himself to put out there and increase his celebrity, which, by the way, is something the real Ivanhoe Martin actually did.
Yeah. Just reading up on the real Ivanhoe, you just totally expect that to be in his character, just to give him a bit of notoriety out there as someone who you don't want to mess with, basically.
Yeah, which is something that I guess is common to a lot of these stories. Before the Warren Beatty Faye Dunaway movie, Bonnie and Clyde were mainly famous for those photos of themselves they took.
Yeah, that's true.
It's part of the sort of whole, the old cliche about the criminals wanting to taunt the police, but it means something else when you're talking about criminals who become celebrities in that way, I guess.
Yeah, definitely.
I wonder if the DJ's sort of thing about saying, this guy, he's a bad guy, but you're requesting this record. Do you think that ethos could be revived now? Because there's no shortage of stars that you have to say that about now.
If anything, I think Not really now these days, no. I mean, the
No.
closest you probably ever thought about is probably in the 90s when we had hip hop. But even
Oh
then,
yeah.
that might be a stretch, yeah.
No, I think that's true. There's an element to gangster rap that's braggadocio, but there's also an element where a lot of them really were involved with gangs. So yeah, maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah,
And then again, you look at the assassinations of Biggie and Tupac as well, and
exactly.
yeah, exactly. So it completely intertwines with one another. Yeah.
Yeah. So I really enjoyed this film. I've got a lot of positive things to say about it, but I don't think I could come up with a piece of praise weirder than the one that I found on its original poster, or no, not poster, a print ad for it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of those great 70s print ads, which is like 90% text. They really hadn't worked out how to grab the eye at that point. But the big banner headline is pulled from a review, and it says, "Infinitely more intelligent than Last Tango in Paris."
Oh, bloody hell! I mean, what a leap!
I mean, I don't disagree. This is an anti-Bertolucci podcast. But it's...
Sorry.
Why?
The one thing I am disappointed with Robert Altman is that he praised Last Tango in Last Tango in Paris.
Oh,
At
did
one point.
he?
Yeah, I can't remember what he did. He did praise it though at one point. I'm fairly certain.
I think there was a point in the 70s where it maybe looked good, but I was not born then, and boy, when I watch it, I can tell I wasn't born then.
Oh dear. Let me just
But yeah, I
yeah.
would say this was infinitely more intelligent than Last Tango in Paris. I would say this is infinitely more action-packed than Shadowlands as well. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like I say, I mean, going back onto the blaxploitation point, because obviously, you would think that going into this that it is going to be like this blaxploitation kind of film, but at the same time, with blaxploitation, I think they don't get enough credit for obviously portraying like this community in as more not necessarily commemorating it, but giving it a name.
Yeah,
Making
yeah,
sure it's like it's out there, you know what I mean? It's just
yeah,
it gives it like a little bit more thought and intelligence for a crime movie because you totally wouldn't expect that from how raggedy it could be. Like I
yeah.
say,
But like we said, that's part of why it is authentic. That it is obviously something that's come, for all that it's being funded by Chris Blackwell, and people can have a lot of debate about whether the good that Chris Blackwell did Jamaican culture outweighs the bad, but ultimately it is a cheap movie that was made piecemeal over a couple of years, and when that happens, it means that either things go horribly wrong or things are wonderfully authentic. And in this case, I think it's extremely authentic. It's all positive.
definitely agree. Yeah, because am I thinking that this is like one of Perry Henzell's only directorial credits as well?
He's not a name I've come across outside of this. Let me see if there's anything else that...
Oh, okay. No, I've just loaded up Letterboxd right now, and the only other credit that is come up is No Place Like Home.
From 2006. I mean, people talk about Terrence Malick not pulling his finger out, but yeah, two films, one in 1972, one in 2006. That's extraordinary.
And has Grace Jones in it. How?
Can there be another director whose work is 100% eligible for pop screen? Every film they did, even Jim Jarmusch probably can't say that, and God knows he tries.
Well, like I say, I mean, this is a podcast where we seem to be going through everything Julian Temple's ever done as well, because
Yeah.
every Julian Temple film, like, pretty much qualifies for pop screen.
Yes,
But
yeah, even he must have the odd one where it's like, "Oh, I've tried so hard, but I can't manage to fit Edward Tudor Paul in this."
yeah, definitely. But it also just probably comes to show like how little the Jamaican film industry is in general, to be honest, because there's, like I say, there's not a lot of Jamaican films that spring to mind, unfortunately, and it's a shame for that matter.
It's very true. Yeah, Jamaica punches massively above its weight in musical terms, but the film industry, I guess, it has a more extreme version of the problem that the British film industry does, which is that when Jamaica or Britain are hip, something which usually happens because of music, other country studios will come in and start funding movies. And then when that country is no longer hip, other country studios will all just fuck off. It's just that in Britain's case, the other country is usually America, and in Jamaica's case, the other country is usually us.
Yeah. And we should be ashamed of ourselves, to be perfectly honest with you.
We should have more.
We should.
Yeah. But, on the other hand, they've made it pretty clear that they don't want us around on several occasions. So,
Oh, dear. Oh, God.
Yeah, they
true.
left the Commonwealth. I mean, massive props to them for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally agree.
They've probably missed out on all the fun we've been having recently over badly edited royal photographs. But other than that, I'm sure it's like a pretty positive experience for them.
You know what? I never caught on to that until just now, where it just came up on BBC News saying where Kate Middleton's just said, "Oh, sorry, I may have edited that photograph," and I'm just like, "That's a fucking photograph. What?"
Yeah, it's a very odd story, to put it very mildly. But I think one of the pleasures of recording so close to the release date is we can mention those. Like I was going to say that The Harder They Come was a hugely successful film, but of course it wasn't as successful as the most successful film ever made, which we recently learned was Rebel Moon.
Ozark.
In many ways, Rebel Moon was the film that broke reggae to the West.
Ain't got nothing on the reggae needle drops and small axe. Zach's
No.
eating up, smoking a smoke. This is a really strange off-kilter ending for this episode. Do you want to?
It is. Yeah, I can't bring it back round other than to say I've been waiting to do an episode on The Harder They Come for ages. And I'm really glad that I did now, because I got to watch it for the first time and it was terrific.
Exactly. Yeah, completely agree.
So, just remind people, Aidan, where they can find you on the internet.
Well, they can find me on Letterboxd, where you can have a look at all my controversial 2-paragraph reviews under the username Aidan F.
Some spicy takes in that, I think.
Yeah, some spicy takes in that. Like I say, I was just telling Graham before we recorded the podcast, I got told off at work by a friend saying, "You rated Oppenheimer number 16. It should be in your top 10." I still really enjoyed the film. I mean, what do you expect? But yeah, you can find me under the username AidanF, and I promote most of my written work under X at Doco and Drummer as well.
I am on Letterboxd as well. Just search for Graham Williamson. I'm on Instagram at Graham W Films. I have a website which I should get around to updating at grahamwilliamsonfilms.com. And if you want more of my writing, there's also the Geek Show Patreon at www.patreon.com/The Geek Show, where every weekend I do reviews of Doctor Who and The X-Files, and you'll also get plenty of exclusive episodes of this show. And that's just the bits I do.
I was going to say, do we want to drop what we're recording next? Because even if I do, we probably shouldn't. To be fair, we're talking about Limp Bizkit next. All right.
Yes, yeah. In many ways, The Fanatic is not the movie that popularised Limp Bizkit in the West. But it does make the case that Fred Durst was history's first rock star.
And if you want to hear more of that, tune into our Patreon whenever it's out. I don't know when it'll be recorded.
Coming this summer, I think we're aiming for.
Fair enough.
I won't tie it down any harder than that. But yes, yeah, that's all to get for just £1 or £3, depending on what tier you're at every month. But until next time, we'll be back in a fortnight with more Pop Screen. I've been Graham.
And I've been Aidan.
And we'll see you in 2 weeks' time.